Welcome to the Draft Professor Podcast Network. This is the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. I would like to remind you of who is bringing you daily draft content. Randall Slifer, Josh Townsend, Jake Robertson, Bill Sparks, Parker Blake, Brock Vieira, Newt Weston, Devin Jackson, David Neese, Jacob Roach, Owen, Jared Zhang, Dean Bruce, Brian Maffey. Without these individuals, we could not bring you daily draft content covering the top 175 players in the NFL draft. Thank you for watching, and we'll be with you in a few seconds.
All right, folks, how we doing? This is Randall Slifer and Parker Blake. We're talking about tight ends on this early Sunday morning. Parker, how you doing?
I'm great, man. Great to be here. Great to meet you. I'm excited to talk some tight ends, man. It's one of my favorite positions.
For sure. Did you get to watch a lot of football yesterday? What did you think of those games?
I actually wasn't able to watch any football yesterday, so I'm going to binge watch all of the games, replays of the games today during the NFL slate. So it'll be a busy football day today.
There you go. Yeah, the Georgia-Texas game made me pull up my hair for a little bit. But
I heard it was insane. I heard it was crazy.
I could not believe the outcome of that game, to be honest with you. But we'll move on. It looks like we're going to start with Syracuse tight end Oronde Gadsden. So if you want to start off with that, Parker, what did you see out of him?
For sure. No, I love that he feels super athletic on the field, really good route runner. I wish they used him as a blocker more, and so I could see more of that side of his game. He feels kind of like receiver centric for me. Whenever I look at tight ends, it's always, you have the utility guys, the blockers, and the receivers, and he falls solidly in that receiver category. Though I really like his frame and feel like he could develop that frame into something that could be very useful in line. But it hasn't done it much on film that I've seen so far. So would like to see kind of that side of his game more, but I really love his upside as a receiver.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He broke the Syracuse tight end record in 2022 with 1K, which I'm pretty sure that was relatively easy with Syracuse and how they are throughout the years. I'm from Western New York, so, we saw Donovan McNabb, and then that was kind of it for a while. But I'm glad that Syracuse is trying to make that comeback. He did have that Liz Frank injury, so I'm hoping that doesn't really hinder him in the medicals when they're going through the combine. But I saw the same. I mean, they're using him as a wide receiver. It's hard even to say tight end sort of thing. Blocking, I didn't see that much. His route tree is large. He just needs to kind of fine tune it a little bit, I think. His deceleration's sometimes clunky. I feel like maybe when he's the second or third read, he'll kind of slow down a little bit, which is okay, to be honest with you. I do like him as a receiving threat. I'm curious about his tight end. In this day and age, when we're getting into the tight ends that need to block as well, because the NFL is moving into that role, I'm curious of what team's kind of looking for him. Cincinnati has Gesicki right now. I wonder if they're looking for another pass catching tight end to replace him and eventually and stuff like that. Do you see him going in anywhere? Oh, I didn't even realize you're a Bengals fan, huh?
Yes, sir.
Would he fit in the Bengals offense?
Yeah, no, that's exactly. I love that you brought that up because I know there's been a lot of fans talking about, extending Gesicki, even if it's only for a couple years. But I think with where I have Gadsden slated to fall in the draft, I think he'd be a great, kind of early day 3, mid day 3, most likely pickup that would actually bring a lot more value than you anticipate. I know they got all of McLaughlin last year, but with All's injury this year, then McLaughlin recovering from an injury this year. I haven't really been able to see much of either of those guys, but early on when they were healthy, the Gesicki and All combo was looking really good early on. So I'd love to see another kind of bigger body, more receiver-esque tight end, especially in the Cincinnati offense with T. Higgins up in the air. I think that's a really great landing spot personally. I'd love it, obviously.
Yeah. Man, I agree. I'm surprised that Cincinnati hasn't put in a lot of capital into your tight end system. I feel like Gesicki is the first big-time pass-catching tight end that is viable, picking up the guy from LSU that was from the Minnesota, he was hurt all the time, so he wasn't able to work out. But a good tight end for Joe Burrow, I think will do wonders for him too.
For sure.
All right, now we'll move on to this slide too. We're looking at Luke Lachey from Iowa, and we got a little bit of a different than Oronde Gadsden. He's more of a blocking tight end sort of thing.
Yeah.
He's large and in charge, 6'6", 247. He could run like a 4.7, 40 in high school. He played football, basketball, and track. I like that. And in track, he did do long distance. So those strides you can kind of see on tape. Even though Iowa doesn't use him much in the pass game, to be honest with you, his blocking is really good. I really like how he gets upfield. He can get in the secondary and block relatively well, and he can stand straight up. He did have the task of picking up a lot of the big-time outside edges, and he did pretty well against it. So I think overall his blocking is pretty sound. He reminds me of Dawson Knox, and me being a Buffalo Bills fan. He reminds me of Dawson Knox, where he was the gritty tight end that had to block for a lot. And then once he can move into the NFL, he could honestly up that receiving game and learn through it as long as he has a good quarterback. But what did you see from him?
Yeah, no, I think everyone's going to focus on his blocking ability. I do think he's more balanced than it seems like a lot of people do. I think really what he excels at is, since he's so good at not only blocking on the first level or the second level, but even blocking out in space, whether it's on the perimeter or just downfield. He also does a great job in play action looks, finding those soft spots in zone, being able to just make himself open. He's not going to be a separator in man coverage, but if you're able to get him across in play action looks or just versus zone in general, he's going to be wide open for you. He's a good target, doesn't have crazy exciting yak ability, but he's going to get the ball. He's going to catch the ball, and you're going to be able to have a nice, reliable target that also can block for you, not just a receiver-specific guy, not just a blocking-specific guy, but does both relatively well. Obviously, like you said, better blocker than receiver, but I think he does a great job finding those spots in the zones, especially in today's NFL where, like you talked about earlier, they're getting more run-heavy. That play action is more emphasized, especially we've seen these latest Iowa guys that go out to the league. That's what they excel in when they get to their NFL teams, no matter which team they end up on. So I think he's going to be a perfect slide as the next, Iowa tight end to do some very fun things in the NFL. I think he's right in line for that.
Definitely. Where did you have him going? If like late day 2, or are we talking day 3?
Yeah, no, I have early day 3 right now. I want to watch a little bit more film just to see more of his route running stuff. I really focus. I was very impressed by a lot of his blocking tape, so I kind of got sucked. Me too. That I need to go back through and watch him as a receiver and actually focus on that side of his game. But that could probably, if he puts down a better track time, at the combine, then he's projected to. If he can get like in the 4.6s, I think he could get pushed up into day 2. But right now, I have him early day 3.
Yeah, I have the same too. Yeah, I would like to see him. Iowa doesn't really use him in the red zone, and 6'6", 247 with that slim frame, I feel like they could have used him. He doesn't get much touches in the red zone, so I think he can be viable in that. So I think NFL teams will see that for sure. And he's got a good bloodline because he's the son of Jim Lackey, which all pro. So I mean, that's always a plus for me. I enjoy that sort of nepotism.
Oh, for sure. You gotta give it the credit it's worth.
100%. And he's got the work ethic and all the camps that he got to attend for sure.
For sure.
All right, now we're going to move on to Oscar Delp in Georgia. Parker, you want to start this one off?
Yeah, no, Oscar Delp was an interesting watch to me. I didn't love I just feel like he's one of those higher floor guys, but just doesn't really have a ceiling. Like, I feel like exactly what you're going to get out of him at the next level, but he's not really going to develop further beyond. Like, his 6'5", 250-ish pound frame doesn't really look that filled out, but you worry about adding weight's going to do to his game when he's already not that explosive or really that strong. You hope it help in the blocking game, but how much of his receiving talent do you lose? Again, I think he's a solid floor guy. I think he's a solid day 3 guy to bring onto a team where you just need someone that can fit that spot, whether it is just blocking help or some short yardage for like receiving. But I just not a huge fan of his game. Don't see a lot of like long-term potential. But if you're looking for a safe pick, I think he's a great guy to go with.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like we might be out of consensus on it. And it might be because he's kind of playing for Georgia. But it's also hard. It's also hard to figure out, to be honest with you, because he's had such a tough tight end room in previous years. So, he's sitting behind Brock Bowers last year and stuff like that. And then now they went and got Oscar Delp was there, and then Benjamin Yurosek came in. So now, they're splitting shares as well. So, to kind of figure out where it is, but he's a decent blocker as long as it's not crazy difficult, to be honest. When I'm seeing the blocking, if he has to stand straight up, he can do it, and that's fine, and it works. But then if he has good hand placement, he has good grip strength as well. But if he pulls across a line, which they used him a lot on, and if he's sitting out wide and they bring him into the tight end, and then he has to pull across the line, he doesn't really do well with picking it up. I feel like it's his timing on the blocking. And then also getting up to the second level when he's blocking has issues with that as well, whether it's locating a linebacker or DB or just doing that. But I see him in open space a lot. His receiving game is good, but I am also concerned about his run after catch. I feel like first contact, he will fall a lot of the times. And then that's where, when you talked about Parker, like if he gains weight, is that going to help his contact balance, or is that going to make him fall harder, sort of thing? So I'm curious about that. So whatever he ends up doing in the NFL, I agree. He's more of a high floor guy. You could get him into a tight end 2 role if that position's open for him to take immediately. And I do think that he has a good IQ to learn on the run. So if that floor could be beneficial to him getting drafted to a team that needs him right away, and I think he can use that to just learn on the fly.
No, 100%. I think that's exactly where he fits in. I think he could be a day 1 tight end 2, but he's just going to forever be a tight end 2. He's not really going to work himself into that tight end 1 role. But especially in a run-heavy league, I love that you brought that up, because one of the things I actually added to kind of my blocking grading system this year for offensive line and tight ends is what I call like player tracking, where you're going to have some guys that are better at just kind of, I need to be stationary and then be able to get to my track, get on my guy. I'm not going to succeed well in space. Then you have the guys that are great at these pulling style blocks, whether it's the, split zone kick out blocks, or pulling on counter, whatever it might be, or blocking at the second level. And Oscar Delp is a guy where if you're running duo, then you're going to love to have Oscar Delp as your tight end too, because he's going to be able to sit on that backside, scoop that D end out, or scoop out that, wide defensive tackle, and you'll be off to the races. But yeah, you don't want to move him around too much really in general. And that's, again, why I worry just about what the weight does as far as just his overall balance. And he already struggles to track players in space. So what does that look like moving forward?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. The chip block and then like get open is kind of his bread and butter for me, sort of thing. And a couple more like flat routes are good, but that's, yeah, I think me and you might be against the wave of Oscar Delp, to be honest with you. All right, we're going to move on to Rivaldo Fairweather. Rivaldo Fairweather was pretty interesting from Auburn. It was kind of an interesting tape to watch. 6'4", 252, could run a good 40. He was a 3-star prospect. He was really good at basketball in high school, and you can kind of see that on his contested catches and his 50-50 balls. He can high point it. He has really good length. He has good size for a tight end, even though he's 6'4". Arms are long. He has a really good catch radius. Obviously, in the Miami offense, they use him a lot, or not Miami, I'm sorry, Auburn offense. It's a spread offense, and they use him a lot on the outside. But his route tree is pretty limited. Watching him in his route running, his route shorts are okay. He's a little clunky, but he can get it going. Some are good, some are bad, sort of thing. But he works best in those intermediate routes. I really like when they use him in some pre-snap motion, and then he does a deep crosser, because he does look kind of like a wrecking ball at 6'4", 252 with some speed. And those deep crossers are kind of where I enjoy him the most. I am a little nervous about his blocking. Watching some of the games, like especially the Arkansas, and I think it might have been Auburn. I mean, biasly, I'm like 5 minutes away from the Arkansas Razorback Stadium. So I'm not a big fan of Auburn, but Auburn's scheming sometimes was very confusing. Like I was watching the Arkansas game live, and they were giving Rivaldo Mayweather one-on-ones with Landon Jackson. And they did that probably about 5 or 6 times throughout that game, and he got burned at least 4 or 5 of them, but it's against Landon Jackson. I'm not sure why Auburn was scheming him to just go one-on-ones while Landon Jackson should be doubled. So I'm looking at his blocking game. It's good, but they're giving him tall tasks that make him kind of look bad sometimes. And I kind of feel for the kid, but I think he can learn from it. And at least he has that competition in place. So if he's in the Senior Bowl or Shrine Bowl, he can maybe show it in a little better circumstance. I did read on some Reddit that he was going through an undisclosed injury in the past couple months, and he's been playing through it. So that could be something as well that's kind of hindered some of his tape. I do see him right now as like a dual threat guy that needs to fine tune almost all of his things to make him work. If he gets drafted in late day 3 is where I have him. Keep him at a tight end 3 or a practice squad guy, let him develop and see where he can go from there. But what did you see from him?
Yeah, no, this is a guy that you're definitely just swinging on the upside, in my opinion. But the one thing that really just stands out in his film is you can see the basketball background in the way that he plays. I think that's why he eats up those intermediate routes so well. because he has surprising length, which leans into impressive catch radius, like you talked about. But it's just crazy what he's able to do, what he's able to get to. And I was actually very impressed by his ability to block out in space, whether, again, perimeter, second level, whatever that might be. It is just when he's kind of tasked with those defensive linemen, which isn't an ideal matchup anyway. But then being 6'4", he has the arm length, but that's 6'4", 210. You can kind of see him buckle under certain blocks or struggle to get displacement when he's blocking at the first level. So that's something that he's either going to have to, like you said, improve everything to get better, or just lean into his strengths and just be a limited role player. So it's all about how a team really wants to use him. I can see the upside. I can see the vision because, again, that catch radius is fun, and he plays a lot bigger than 6'4" as far as frame-wise goes. Definitely. But I worry about kind of his size being super undersized to play actual tight end. He feels more like a guy that should be one of these slot receiver style, tight ends. But I'm interested to see what he will turn into and what a team wants to bring him in and utilize him as, because he has a fun profile. It's just kind of hard to place him just because I feel like it's such a specific role that he fits.
For sure. Yeah, I could see like Miami using him pretty well because they need that length, kind of Waddle. Waddle's smaller, but he can run those deep routes. I'd be interested to see him going a little bit deeper than just the intermediate, especially with his basketball background. But you're right. I mean, he only has 2 drops on 50 targets in Auburn, which when shady quarterback play, and 5 contested catches on 15 opportunities. That's 33% on catching those. That's impressive as well. So I agree. I would like to see that upside work out for sure.
He's going to be a fun preseason player. I'll tell you that right now.
100%. I love that. All right. Big prolific offense. If you want to take this one, Terrance Ferguson.
Yeah, no, Terrance Ferguson was one of the first tight ends I watched this summer, or I think it was actually my midseason when I kicked this film off for the first time. And the first thing I noticed is that he just has a hard time dropping the ball from the film that I watched. Like, he's one of the more sure-handed guys, at least in the tape that I've been able to get my hands on so far. I never like just saying that. I don't have, a high volume of games in for the season, but so far from what I've seen, whether it's contested, the wide open ones, the hard angles to get to, he's got great hand placement and able to find the ball well. I think he's above average blocker in line. I think he does a great job of just destroying linebackers and corners when they put him out on the perimeter. I think he's a very well-rounded guy, but I think he's also going to just fall into that bucket of high floor guy, tight end 2 guy, but don't love the ceiling. So I don't know what his long-term future is again, but I do love what he's going to be able to do day one in the NFL. I just don't know how much of him you can develop. He looks pretty full. Like, the frame looks pretty full at 6'5", 255, 260. Yeah. And I don't know how much more mass you're going to put on or how much more explosiveness you're going to get out of that frame. But I think he does a great job of, again, playing that tight end 2 role. I think he can move around a little bit. Does a great job. He can get separation on linebackers, but he can also out-physical them for the ball. He's just a great kind of middle-of-the-field threat. I think he's a great target when you're in the high red zone. He's able to stretch the field a little bit, but then just sit back down on it. So I love his game. He's a really fun prospect to watch, but I just don't think he doesn't have that day 2 upside for me, but he's got the day 2 floor for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think he could have some ceiling. I think Oregon has been switching kind of like what he was like in 2023. He was used much more in the short game and less in the intermediate and deep shots. Like this year, they're using him out wide like 5 to 6 times a game. And I think he looks well on the outside. Like when he's running those routes on the outside, he looks good. So he can do it consistently. From 2023 to 2024, they moved up his average depth of target all the way up to 10 when it was about like 5.5 or 6. So they're using him more out wide and using him more in the deep shot. So I'm curious to see what NFL teams will look at that and saying, okay, well, maybe this guy can be more of a pass catcher on the outside wide. And then when he comes on the inside, be that blocker. So it may be kind of calculated at what he's going to do, and people may know what his position is, but he can still get it done, I think, with his size. I do agree. I don't think he can gain any more. He did gain about 25 pounds from high school to college. So that might have been what, they told him he could fill and be like, just do it now sort of thing and go from there. Yeah, so I do think that his floor is high. I have a little bit higher on the ceiling. I think he is efficient. I think being with Oregon and Dan Lanning, I know that it's kind of like that prolific offense. So when I was watching it, it's fun to watch and to see because the team in general, offensive line's really good too. So he helps in that blocking. The offensive line helps him as well, sort of thing. So the system is built really well for him to come out in the NFL draft as that day 2 guy with that high floor. I think he can turn into a tight end 1 in a pickle sort of situation, like tight end 2, tight end 1 gets hurt, and then he kind of flourishes, and then maybe that boosts his confidence and where it is. I could see his ego and confidence getting him into a tight end role. If he can do that, I do think there's a small chance, but I do see him as a late day 2, brinking at that 90 to 100 range, if that's where you had him.
Yeah, for sure. I have him I think right inside of my top one, at the back end of my top 100 right now. So
right.
I think the biggest thing for me with his profile, I just want to see how he tests. I think that'll really help me as far as his ceiling goes. I just don't see that high-end athleticism often or consistently enough on his film to give him that yet. But I mean, if he can show that he can do it, I'm all about buying into it. I love his game.
For sure, I agree. Yeah, and I always try and find out which tight ends or which wide receivers played lacrosse. And I know Terrance Ferguson played lacrosse, and I know Oscar Delp played lacrosse. So I always like that, just because lacrosse players are gritty. They'll hit anybody.
For sure, and they can handle it too.
Exactly. All right, Pittsburgh. Gavin Bartholomew. Let's see. I'll start this one off if I can get my notes. Gavin Bartholomew from Pitt. We're looking at 6'5", 250. Quick guy. In high school, he did damn near everything. He played defensive end. He punted. He was a dual threat quarterback, and then he played a little bit of tight end. So and it kind of shows, Pitt was recruiting him, he's a gadget tight end as well. He's at all facets of the special teams and punt return, kick return, everything. Lines up in line, but also has lined up 124 times out wide this year. So he is legitimately a gadget tight end. He goes up against man and zone. He's pretty physical. He can get through there. He's consistent. He has over 300 yards per year. Out wide, he looks good. His route running's decent. I would say, like what we just talked about with Terrance Ferguson, 6'5", 250, he plays a little lighter. He can move quicker. And in those intermediates, he kind of gets going. He only has 2 touchdowns, and that's a little concerning. I think my big knock for him is probably playing with Pitt and seeing the competition that he had to face and how he will develop into the NFL. He's an okay blocker, not great at pass protection, but can block on the move. So when we were talking about stationary versus on the move, I think he's a better blocker on the move than being stationary, but he can work on that stationary for sure. He can build leverage. I have him as a late day 2, unless somebody sees a better upside on him in that he's a gadget guy, and being special teams, he's basically 2 men on one roster sort of thing. So I could see him getting drafted higher than I see him, but he does need a little development. What did you see out of him?
Yeah, no, another guy where I love his game, mostly because I just saw him as a very high motor player, and it's a willingness thing, right? Where there's a lot of guys where you see them get into the league and they have the things that they're either good at doing or they like doing. They just kind of lean into that side of their game. Where, Gavin's a guy that's going to come in and he just wants to be on the field playing football. Like you said, I mean, he'll be in every phase if he can be. Like, he just wants to get out there and be involved. But unfortunately, the heart doesn't always make the athlete. And I wish that he, just, again, had more play strength at 6'5", 250. It was kind of jarring how much he struggled moving guys at times, especially as an inline blocker. And you'd love to see him develop more there. I think he's a really fun gadget guy, like you said. And he's a guy that I would definitely want on my roster. But again, it's just, how do you get him on the field in an effective way with his skill set is kind of going to be a hard thing for guys to find. But I think, like you said, the special teams, bonus that he can bring to your squad is going to get him drafted higher than probably where I have him at my board. I have him as a 4th round guy, early day 3. I don't see him getting probably halfway through the 4th round at, the latest. But
yeah,
I worry about just finding a spot for him in an offense, to be honest.
I agree. Kind of that. I mean, there is always a role on the NFL as a tight end 3 special teams guy. So, I mean, that is kind of like a bread and butter of somebody that needs to fill that roster, whether you go that in UDFA typically sort of thing, but then he's obviously a good option. But yeah, I see that as well. And I hope he is fun, and I hope that people see kind of past Pitt, in my opinion, and then kind of go from there.
Hey, he's the perfect guy for the dynamic kickoff, isn't he?
100%. Especially next year if they go to the 35-yard line where all kicks are, he'll be a bruiser and he'll work on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great call. Great call. All right. I might be higher than most people on this, man. Probably because he was on my fantasy team last year. So, so we'll talk about Benjamin Yurosek. Benjamin Yurosek transferred Stanford over to Georgia to work with Oscar Delp, obviously, being that two tight end system. He wanted to move over there to show that he can play in the SEC. In interviews, he said that he wanted to show that he can play in the SEC, which I commend him for that on that. In high school, he played defense. He played edge as well as wide receiver, tight end. So that's kind of impressive as well. His Stanford years were great. Statistically, 2022 was the best at 444 yards, but he is consistent. Stanford's always had some problems with quarterbacks. Hopefully they don't now. Be taking it. Andrew Luck is the GM over there, so I'm pretty sure he should get some better quarterbacks over at Stanford. He's more of a pass catching tight end, obviously. He's at that frame at 245. They use him out wide a lot. They use him in the slot a lot. He's got a high vertical. He's almost more like a wide receiver than a tight end to me, to be honest. And I am trying to get out of that mindset when it comes to the NFL changing, but he is that prototypical Gesicki or things along those lines where he can consistently catch. He's great at high pointing the ball, 35 contested catches, caught 19 of them with only 6 drops. So that's impressive. But he can still use his short area quickness, and his yards after catch per reception at 7.3. So I'm very impressed with what he can do in the passing game. He isn't used insanely amount in the blocking game, but he does have decent technique and hand placement when he's in line with the tight end. So I do like that. He'll block long enough for running backs in line as well. So if he needs to hang on with his grip strength, he can do that. He's not that great on the move based on his size and his slim. He kind of whiffs on sometimes, but also almost jumps over guys when they fall, when they go for his ankles and things along those lines. So blocking is not great. I'd like to see more out of him for that, but his pass catching is great. What did you see out of Benjamin Yurosek?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head as far as his blocking goes. I think he's a good in-space blocker, but I think once you get him in line, he'll get the job done for you. He's not going to be a liability in the run game, but he's just not going to do anything impressive. But I think when you look at his game holistically, that's really one of the only weaknesses he has. I think he's a really strong receiver. And again, I think he contributes a lot as far as perimeter blocking goes. So really, he just needs to, hone in his inline blocking to be an all-around tight end. But I think he's got legitimate tight end one upside, can be a really effective tight end to the next level. And I think I currently have him I had him as a late second round guy a little bit ago, dropped a few spots, and he's in the third round for me now. But I am a big fan of Yurosek. I was so frustrated watching his Stanford tape because I felt like he was doing a great job separating. He was getting open, just wasn't getting the looks, or they had him on the backsides of concepts, or he was he was never involved in the play. And so I was so excited to see him go to Georgia, and I feel like he's done a great job down there. I think it was the right decision for him. I think it did a lot for his stock. He's a guy that I'd love to see at a Senior Bowl and get that opportunity to get against some better talent, work against some guys, and get that stock up a little bit because I think he deserves it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Stanford was rough because it's like they used Alec Ayomanor so much in that scheme in 2023 and things along those lines where he just got a lot of targets. And you're right, he ran the right routes, he got separation, and he just wasn't used, or he was used on flats just to deceive and stuff like that. So I do I would have maybe liked to see Yurosek pick a different SEC team other than Georgia. Because then Oscar Delp was used more, to be honest with you, and that's kind of what stunned it a little bit. So, but a different SEC team would have worked for him. But I'm glad that he kind of took that risk when a lot of people might have just kind of went for it, sort of thing.
For sure.
All right, and then I think we're on to the grand finale. Parker, if you want to start off with Mason Taylor.
Yeah, no, Mason Taylor is a strong dude, man. 6'5", 256, and he'll just punches dudes in the face, and I love watching it. I thought he was really impressive in pass protection. I would have liked to see. I thought he fell off blocks a little too consistently in a negative way. In the run game as far as when he's run blocking, but I thought he anchored really well in pass pro. Didn't really give up a lot in that area, and I thought he was a relatively consistent receiver. I would like to see him be better as far as getting yards after the catch consistently. I feel like it's boom or bust with him as far as what happens after he gets the ball in his hands. Overall, felt like an inconsistent player, but the highs felt really good, and I wanted to see more of it. but then it was kind of like, 2 plays on, 2 plays off type thing in this film that I've watched so far. So it's been hard for me to get a read on him. I can definitely see why people would love him, but I can also see why, a bunch of red flags can pop if you're looking at the film at the wrong time. So I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about him, because I want to know where you landed with him.
For sure. I do like him. I think he's very impressive. I do think that he could fine tune his blocking, but unlike who we talked about earlier, I do believe that I've seen him go up against high level edges and be able to stand his ground. And also in the run game, setting the edge. He can set the edge as well. He's got very long arms, and it definitely works to his ability in the blocking. So I do enjoy watching him block, and I think he is an NFL caliber blocker. And I do like his pass catching as well. I mean, he's got his yards per route run this year is 1.24, which is impressive for a college tight end. I think the highest I saw when we were talking was Oscar Delp, and I think he had 2.01 yards per route run. So still 1.24 is impressive. He can come down with contested catches because he is kind of like a crazy tight end, just like you mentioned. I mean, his dad being Mason Taylor too probably is why, which is incredible. So
that'll help.
Yeah, that'll help for sure. So he comes down with contested catches, and I do really like that he consistently gets first downs. He's had this year it's 55 catches and 37 of them resulted in a first down. So I know his yak is not impressive, but at least I think he knows where the sticks are and what his job is at that point. And I think that's probably the best thing about his pass catching is his timing and his zones and stuff like that. He kind of can operate in a system like Kansas City that would be really good with Patrick Mahomes. Once Travis Kelce leaves, you have Noah Gray. Noah Gray's a good pass catching touchdown, but the timing reminds me a little bit of Travis Kelce, where in an option route, he can sit at that stem and his IQ can kind of pick where that zone is, sit, turn, catch, run sort of thing, or at least fall down with those sticks. So I think his timing is really good in that game, and then he's a good blocker. I do have him in the top 75, but more towards that 65 to 75 range. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets into late day 2, but we'll kind of see. I wouldn't be surprised if he's late round 3 or late round 2, either or, and we'll see. But I do have him right now in the top 75.
Awesome. So I'm not too far off. I had him like kind of mid round 3 right now. I just, like I said, I love the highs of his game, and I can, like, if you could just put like a highlight clip of him like cut up together, I would fall in love with the guy. But it's just I just worry about kind of some of the flaws in his game, and if he's going to work that stuff out, or if it's just going to be stuff that you have to deal with forever with him. Because it is kind of some of that stuff that you see certain guys work through, but other guys just never are able to figure out. But I think that Travis Kelce, you never want to say comp with a guy like Travis Kelce, but the comparison actually fits really well. I think he does a great job. And that's why I think it's so frustrating for me, where when he's running these routes and he's able to separate well, he's able to sit down in zones, well, he's able to find that space to work. But then for some reason, always, he's just catching the ball and falling down, or he's catching the ball, getting a yard or two, getting tackled. Like, if he could break more of these shorter routes and turn them into at least, pushing towards an explosive play range, I'd be a lot more excited about his upside. But he feels like a guy that you can rely on, a great red zone target, in my opinion, just finding those empty spots, sitting in the lane, being available. But I just worry about his upside as far as what he's able to generate long-term, just consistently.
Yeah, no, that's probably definitely his biggest flaw for sure. And that would be interesting. I mean, he will get drafted high, so it'll just be probably depending on what team and what tight end coach kind of just bully him for a half a year and make sure that he gets tough for the NFL, to be honest.
For sure.
All right. Well, that was our last. Parker, I appreciate you. You talk ball. You talk ball good. You coach, right?
Yes, sir. Coach high school football.
Nice. What do you head coach or position?
Offensive line coach, run game coordinator, kind of
nice.
2 for 1. Yes, sir.
All right. Well, it looks like since I can DM you, I'm going to DM you offensive line scouting reports and see what you think, if I'm wrong or right.
Hit me up anytime. I feel like I'm always like the contrarian, and I promise it's not intentional. I just feel like I'm super picky about my offensive linemen. So I'll talk ball all day long. I love it.
Oh, that's perfect. Parker, where can we find you on any social media?
Yeah, no, everything that I do will always flow through my X account, my Twitter account at ParkerBlake60. I write for a couple sites here and there. I do a couple shows here and there, but everything I always post to my X account, so that way it's all there for people to find. I also have subscriptions available there. I'm diving into some free agent stuff right now as the college football season's kind of winding down and waiting for the all-star, quote unquote all-star season for college football stuff before I get too heavy into any of my bigger draft breakdown stuff. I've been posting updated boards as I get some of these grades in and updated, and guys are shifting around. So I'll be posting my next milestone will be my top 150. So I'll get that full list posted for my subscribers first and foremost. Then I also do some live coverage when I'm down at the Senior Bowl Combine, when I'm going to all these events. So that's just fun. But yeah, I do all kinds of stuff. It's all on X at Parker Blake 60. That's where it's all at.
Oh, that's perfect. All right. And then you can find me at Randall Slifer as usual. We appreciate you coming out in early Sunday morning, checking us out. Thanks, Parker.
Yeah, it's been a blast.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by Draft Professor. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please like the podcast on YouTube. Please follow us on Twitter at NFL Draft Fanatic. Thank you again for watching. On behalf of everybody that put this podcast together, we appreciate our followers very, very much. And we look forward to seeing you on a future podcast.